Good evening, everyone. It is so good to see y'all here and good to see so many visitors back from Sunday. So that's always good as well. Before we begin our lesson this evening, through the minor prophets, continuing the book of Hosea, let's go to God in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you once again for providing us this beautiful day, for us to be able to gather together to lift up songs of praise, to be able to dive into your word, to be able to study it. Lord, to be able to just learn more and more about you. Lord, I pray that you can help us to be able to pull examples out from the text this evening, be able to pull stuff out of it, Lord, and be able to apply it to our life, be able to share it with those around us. Lord, and I pray that you let this study this evening help us to grow closer to you, strengthen our walk with you, and just to learn from the example that we're about to discuss this evening, Lord, and how we can better keep our eyes focused on you and not be distracted by all the different things in the world around us. Lord, says be with us as we go throughout this study tonight. Lord, and just let it be pleasing in your sight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, for those of us, or for those of you joining us as we go throughout this study, we've been going through the minor prophets for several months now, and we find ourselves in the book of Hosea, and we've kind of found a similar or a common theme all throughout the book. Essentially, the northern and the southern kingdom, mostly the northern kingdom up until this point, has essentially gone astray, and they have gone after false idols and things of that nature, and they've essentially forsaken God and what God desires, what God wants from them. They're offering up to Baal worship, calf worship, making false oaths, things of that nature. And so, as we talked a little bit last week, one of the biggest takeaways you would take from chapter 9 would be that God is essentially going to take away their ability to have new children. Which in that time would have been something that is extremely important to them because the more children, the bigger your family be, but also kind of shows that God is blessing you. The children are a blessing. And God is going to take away that blessing because of the things that they've done and things of that nature. And even the ones that they do have, they're going to lose in wars and in different battles and things of that nature. And so a lot of havoc is going to come to Ephraim, as you're going to see here, the northern and southern kingdom at different times. But a lot of havoc is going to come to them because they are forsaken, because they have left God, and because they've turned away from that. And as we've talked about numerous times already in the past, the same thing can happen to us today. Now, we might not get, taken over by the Assyrians or the Babylonians and be led off into captivity. But if we decide we want to go against God, if we decide we want to leave what God has wished and desired from us, we can expect a not so nice ending, I guess, to our journey here, which is what they're about to experience because they're about to find out that all these earthly things that they have put their hope in, well, they're not really going to check out very well when they really need them. They're not going to be there for them when you need them. So, as they've kind of put their hope in earthly things and in money and possessions and power and things of that nature, when it really comes down to it, the only person you can really put your hope into who will always be there regardless is God. And once you take away him and you don't put him at number one anymore, and he decides to leave you as he does them here because they've left him first, um, sorrow is soon to follow. And so we're going to see that as we go throughout chapter 10. And as it starts in verse 1, it says it says Israel is a luxuriant vine that yields its fruit. The more fruit or the more his fruit increased, the more altars he built, and as his country improved, he improved his pillars. And so this vine right here, if you go back and you think about the whole history of Israel and you think about kind of all the generations going into it. They originally got into captivity because Joseph, now he got sold off because of his brothers. But when Joseph got into Egypt, he was faithful to God throughout numerous different things. And there was times where he easily could have just mailed it in and been like, this is just not, working. God must have left me. Why am I getting arrested? Why is this, why am I away from my family? But Joseph stayed persistent, and because of that, later on, his family will end up coming over, and then they prosper in the land, and then a new Pharaoh comes in, and then slavery and all these other things start to take place, right? Bondage and everything else. Before they have to get led off into the wilderness, and then we know how that whole story goes, right? But if you start to look at their whole history, it's not as if, and sometimes I think we kind of loop this in with all of the Old Testament. They're just always corrupt. We just always kind of think that they're always away from God. They're always wandering. They're not always wandering. There's times where they are faithful. There's time where they are prospering. But then there's also times you can see where they were prospering and then they decided to turn away from it and go against it. And so They're this vine, and this vine should be something that is producing fruit for God, just as the church today should be a vine that is producing fruit for God. And He should be able to see the fruits that we're producing. And so they are this vine that should be producing fruit. The problem is all the fruit that they are producing, they are just keeping for themselves. We talked about this a little bit this past Sunday, but it says that it yields its fruit. The more fruit, the more his fruit increased, the more altars he builds. And they ain't building altars to God. They are building altars to false gods, right? And so when you really go back into this, and for those that weren't here, we'll just kind of briefly touch on it. But when you go back into earlier chapters, God has already called them out for the fact that they are essentially giving credit to Baal and all these pagan gods for them having more wealth and more crops because, oh, well, Baal must have sent down the rain because he's over storms and things of that nature. Is that really who's in charge of the rain? Is that really who's in charge of causing the increase of crops? It's God, right? And these blessings that they're receiving is from God. And so the more fruit that they increase, the more altars that they're building. The problem is they're not building them to the right person. They're not giving the right person credit. Instead, they're going against it. And so they build these more altars, the more altars they build. And then it goes on, it says, as his country improved, he improved his pillars. What are the pillars for? Is that to worship God as well? No, it's not. It's part of pagan worship, right? The more God blessed them, the more they did what? Essentially turned away, essentially went further away from God. Basically, right? They took the blessings that they had from God and they use them for pagan and for false gods. And so as we start to go throughout chapter 10, on the first 11 verses or so, you're going to see 5 different things kind of show up. And in the first 2 verses, you're going to see Hosea speaking about Ephraim's sin. That's going to be in the first 2 verses. When you get into verses 3 through 5, you're going to start to see sorrow start to take over. Then when you get into verse 6, you're going to see some shame discussed. Verses 7 through 8 of chapter 10, you're going to see the suffering is discussed. And then finally there in verses 9 through 11, you're going to see the sentence that they're going to receive because of these things that are taking place. And so as he starts out chapter 10, he starts to talk about this sin that they have. And we talked about this past Sunday, but as God blesses them with these things, they keep it for themselves. They use it for themselves. They use it for earthly pleasure. As God blesses us, as God prospers us, are we using what God has lent us for His kingdom, or do we take it for our own personal use, our own personal convenience? This church building, the money that we have, whether it be a lot or whether it be a little, is all lent from God for us to borrow and for us to use for the kingdom while we are here. It is not our paycheck, right? It's not the money that we made. God afforded the opportunity for us to have that and to make it. And we need to be giving the Creator the credit that He deserves. And that's something that they've lost here. And so these blessings they're receiving, they're not giving credit to God. And so they, as their country improves, they should be giving credit to God, but instead they're improving their pillars, which is for pagan worship. And as you start to look at verse 2, it really starts to sink in. Their heart is false. Now, sometimes this word heart right here is going to mean tongue, and it very well could be talking about, as we're going to see here in a second, some of the false oaths that they are making. But it could, whether it be the tongue or whether it be the heart, it's pretty clear that their worship towards God is false. And we've seen that all the way through the 9 chapters previous to this. But their heart is false. And in 3-4 chapters back, it said that their heart was not in it. And so you can see that they have a disease issue. You could say they have CHF or whatever, CHD, whatever, CHA is what it is, coronary heart disease, all these other things. They have a heart issue, right? They need open heart surgery. But they ain't got no one to perform it because the person that should be performing it, they don't want anything to do with them, right? And so they have a heart issue. They have a fear of God issue. They have this issue of following what He wants. And so it says their heart is false. Their heart is false, as we're going to see later on, because they've gone into the lies of different fruits and things of that nature. But it says, because their heart is false, now they must bear their guilt. Would they have to bear this guilt if their heart was true? Would they have to go through what they're about to go through if they would have just leaned on God this entire time instead of turning away to false gods? The reason that they have to face the wrath of God is because they're doing what? Going against God. The same thing with us today. we are not going to have to face the wrath of God unless we decide that we want to go and have this false heart and go against God, go against His commandments, never contact the blood. Then one day we are going to face the wrath of that, right? But if we commit our life to Him, if we obey His commandments, if we contact the blood and things of that nature, we receive grace. We can receive forgiveness. So their heart is false, and now they're going to have to bear this guilt. And it says the Lord will break down their altars and destroy their pillars. Boy, it's going to be a shame. They made so many golden calves. They spent so much time on that. They used all of their possessions that they were so richly blessed with to make all these little beautiful altars that they just put up, all these little household gods. And then the real God is going to come through and do what? Destroy them. Now, if they would have stored up their treasure in heaven, what could have happened? It wouldn't have been destroyed, right? But when you build up all your treasures here on earth, right? Well, they can be destroyed real quick, real easily, right? And so the Lord is going to break down their altars, all these pagan altars and everything else. It's going to be broke down, and the Assyrians are going to come in and really do a number on it as well, as we talked about last week. But it's going to destroy their pillars as well. These things that they're leaning on, these things that they're offering up false things to God, it's all going to be done away with. And we've talked about this 1,000 times over, I guess, in the last previous classes over this book of Hosea. But this sounds awful that they're going to have to go through this destruction and this captivity, and they're going to be let off, and they're going to lose everything they have. In all reality, this is going to end up being a blessing for them because this is what they need in order to get back right with God. Now, hindsight 2020, they probably wish they never would have left God and they wouldn't have to experience this. But because they have essentially become so stubborn, they are going to hit rock bottom and then find a way to go below rock bottom. And then they're eventually going to see that they should turn back to God. And so He's going to break down their altars and tear down the pillars. And it says in verse 3, it says, "For now they will say, we have no king, for we do not fear the Lord. And a king, what could He do for us? We have no king." I thought they wanted a king, right? They wanted a king, right? They wanted these different things. It could be anarchy. If you look back in some of the previous chapters, what have they done to kings and rulers and even the prophets that have come and brought stuff? There's been killing, assassinations, everything else, right? It's just complete anarchy, which they have a whole list of political things going on, which is what's getting into this shape as well as going against God. But the key is really the middle part of verse 3. "For we do not fear the Lord," as if they acknowledge the fact that they do not fear the Lord, right? So they have this lack of fear. They admit that they have no king, right? And it says, and at the end of verse 3, it says, "And a king, what could he do for us?" Because what has been mentioned before is it doesn't matter if another nation wants to try to get involved in this situation. No one is going to stop God from allowing them to go into captivity because they are eventually going to have to answer for their iniquity. And so they confess, they admit that they have this lack of fear for God. They admit that what could a king even do anyways, because they are against God, and who is going to stop what God is going to want to happen. And as you see here in verse 4, and this is mentioned in previous chapters, they utter mere words. With empty oaths, they make covenants. They utter mere words. Now, if you go back and you think about previous chapters we've talked about, they were making oaths to God. The problem is, as they were making oaths to God, they were offering up sacrifices to pagan gods. Kind of a little bit of a contradiction, isn't it? Probably shouldn't be offering up an oath to God as you're offering up a sacrifice to a golden calf. Probably doesn't go hand in hand, does it? And so they are uttering up mere words. We today can offer up utter mere words. It doesn't do us a lick of good. If you have the heart problem, if you lack love, if you don't want to follow any of His commandments, it doesn't matter how good your speech is. It doesn't matter that you know every single word in the text. It doesn't matter that you can utter all these words because they are just that, just words, because you're not putting them into action, right? And so people always love to say that actions speak louder than words. And I've mentioned this before in previous classes, but for our visitors, food for thought. By their actions, what are they saying to God that they want for eternity? Are they saying that they want to spend eternity with God? Or are they saying they'd rather spend eternity with some golden calf that didn't even go and inherit eternity anyways, because it's going to be burned up, right? What are their actions telling God? Because your words can say, well, Lord, I want this. but what do your actions say? And I think we should be asking ourselves the same questions. What is our life today? What is how we structure our day by placing what we think is most important? What is that telling God that we want for our eternity? Is that saying to God, I am fully committed to you. I fully want you. Heaven is what I want my end goal to be. Or are we just using utter words, mere words? And as it said previously, 2 chapters ago, they were just useless vessels, right? Because they weren't even making themselves available. They were going against God. And so are our actions today saying, God, I want to have a relationship, or are our actions just mere words and we're really telling God, I'd rather actually chase after all these other things? I'd rather, spend more time at work to make a little bit more money. I'd rather spend more time at sporting events than going to church. I'd rather go hang out with more friends and less time reading my Bible, praying, and this, that, and the other, right? What are our actions telling God that we want? Because their actions right here are pretty simple, telling God that they really want no part of a relationship with Him because they're more interested in offering up sacrifices to a false idol than they are offering up sacrifices to Him. So they empty up these mere words. They make these empty oaths as they make these covenants. And so it says, so judgment shall spring up like poisonous weeds, as Morgan mentioned. This poison right here will probably be a little bit more effective against the dandelions, I'd imagine. So it says, so judgment springs up like poisonous weeds in the furrows of the field. And so this judgment is going to speak up like a poisonous weed. Now, what does poison do to the body if you're to contact it? It ain't Miracle Grow, right? Uh, Kills it. What does poison do? What did Morgan hope the poison was going to do to the dandelions? Kill it, get rid of it. Made them stronger. No, so it's gonna creep up like these poisonous weeds, and it's gonna creep in like the weeds of the field. And we're gonna talk about this a little bit later on. But when a field is completely covered and overrun with weeds and everything else, and you want to plant a crop, what do you have to do first? You got to plow up the soil. You got to get rid of the weeds. You got to clean it out. And that's what they need to do because they have all these poisonous weeds. What are the poisonous weeds they have in their life right now? All this idolatry. You can't serve God and still have all these idols. You got to get rid of the weeds. That way you can plant what really needs to be planted. And so until they remove the weeds, until they get rid of these poisonous things from their life, you're never going to be able to have this relationship with God because you can't have both. The same thing with our life today. If our life is full of these poisonous weeds, and we basically make it to where we can't even plant the good soil because the poisonous stuff that we're putting in our life is hindering us from getting closer to God, we have to get rid of those things so that we can inherit heaven, so we can have that as be our end goal, right? So we have to get rid of these poisonous things from our life. So then it goes on in verse 5. And it says that the inhabitants of Samaria tremble for the calf of Bethaven. Its people mourn for it, and so do its idolatrous priest, those who rejoiced over it and over its glory, for it has departed from them. And so this calf worship that is going on here, all this calf worship, struggle to say that all night. All the worship that is going on is underneath the northern kingdom, essentially, is underneath the priesthood at Bethel, which is kind of one of the main places of this. And you have a couple different places where this worship was going to be taking place. You got Bethel, you got Dan, and possibly Samaria as well. But you have a couple of different places where they have this calf worship going on. And this is something that Jeroboam started a long time ago because he wanted to create a space where people in the northern kingdom never had to visit the southern kingdom. They never had to do worship the right way. And if you think about the concept and the thought behind that, Jeroboam essentially was saying, well, why would you travel so far to go do worship the way God wanted you to? You don't got to go that far. You can go right here. You don't have to do all those sacrifices. You can just do this right here. Now, you put that into 2026. Why would you travel that far to go worship with a bunch of true believers when you got this place just right here? Any old service will do, right? God will accept just any old worship. Why would you put forth the effort to do this when it's just so convenient right here? This one has services when I don't work. I don't have to change my work schedule to go to this service, right? And so what are we telling God we want in our life? And so you have these different calf worship, and see what it says here in the bottom of, or the end of chapter 5. The people mourn for it, and so do the priests, the idolatrous priests. They rejoiced over it and over its glory, but it's going to depart from them. And it's going to depart from them. It's going to talk about this here in verse 6, but it's going to be carried off into Assyria, as we can see in the beginning of verse 6, and it's going to be as a tribute to the great king. What they put all their hope into is now going to be a tribute to the king over there in Assyria. It's going to be led off. All these things they put in their hope to, they're going to be led off into captivity, and they are going to feel foolish, as he's going to talk about in a couple verses, because all these false worships, all these pagan things they put their hope and their trust in, do absolutely zero good when the enemy comes in. Same thing for us today. When the enemy creeps in, when the rubber meets the road, right? Whatever phrase you want to use, if you put your hope and your trust in earthly things, it will fail you. It's going to fail you. But if you put your hope and your trust in God, what will never fail you? God. Now, that doesn't mean that life is just going to be peachy and easy, and you're never going to have trials and things like that, right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that God has promised us that He will never leave us nor forsake us, right? A golden calf that you make with your hand cannot make that promise, right? And so we have to think about, what are we really putting our hope and our trust in? And is the thing that we're putting our hope and trust in actually something that can live up to the hope and or the promises that it's making? Sue?
It's weird about this golden calf thing. When Aaron made the golden calf for the Israelites waiting for Moses to come back down the mountain, they said about the golden calf, this is the one that brought us out of the land of Egypt. Well, then when Jeroboam made these two golden calves, he said the same thing. This is the one that brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Yeah. And they view these golden calves as something that is powerful. It's something that they picked up from Egypt to start off with, right? And so it's not like this is just some I don't know, silly calf they just came up with. And that kind of worship, it was viewed as something powerful. That might not be how we view a calf today, but it is viewed. They were viewing it as something powerful. And you got to remember, they got a whole bunch of different fake gods going around and everything else. But it is interesting that, and Sue brings up a good point. Numerous times they give credit to other people for getting them out of Egypt, and you can see that all throughout. And even here, they're giving credit to the wrong person, right? And so when God is doing things for them, they give credit to a false calf. And so they repeat that 1,000 times over, and we should learn from that as well. So it's going to depart from them. It's going to be carried off into Assyria as a tribute to the great king. Let's see. Okay, and then it says, Ephraim shall be put to shame, and Israel shall be ashamed of his idol. Now, how are they going to be put to shame?
The things will be carried off to Assyria, and it doesn't help them at all.
Could you imagine? I've used this example a while, I guess probably, I don't know, a couple months back now. How foolish would you seem or feel if you were to put all of your hope and trust into a golden calf, for example, like they're doing, and then a foreign nation comes in and they just carry off that golden calf like it was nothing, and they carry you off with it as well? And you say, I thought that golden calf was going to protect. I've been praying to that golden calf for years now for it to protect us. You know how foolish you have to feel? You look back and you see that little household god that you had sitting in your little mantle, and you're like, that thing is not doing me a lick of good. It's real shiny. It looks real nice, good craftsman work, but it's made with hands, right? And so it does no good. They're going to feel foolish. They're going to be put to shame because of what they've put their hope in. And it says, and Israel shall be ashamed of his idol. It's going to be something that is not going to bring them glory. Instead, it's going to bring them destruction. So then it goes on in verse 7, it says that Samaria's king shall perish like a twig on the face of the waters. When you start to think about this, the whole structure of Israel, everything, all the religious, the priests, and everything else, they've kind of put it into this structure of government that they have. it's not going to be very hard for it to be swept away by Assyria because God's going to allow Assyria to come in. And so, like a twig on the face of the waters, how well is a twig going to handle against a little bit of rough waters? You gonna build your life vest with that? You gonna build a life raft with that? Probably not. And so, as a little tiny twig, as a twig, even a big log. In all reality, if the waves are strong enough, right? Um, it's going to be on the face of the waters, and that is how they're going to perish. They are going to be carried off. This is not something they're going to be able to stop. They're going to perish because of what they have put their hope into. And it says, "The high places of Avon, the sin of Israel, shall be destroyed." And when you think about these high places, the Baal altars were often up on the hills. And so when you see high places, you have to think about these altars were typically up on the hills. Therefore, like hence the terminology high places. But these high places were a sin to Israel because this is where you have all this worship going on. And the word Avon right there is this Beth Avon, which is mentioned before, or Bethel. And the Avon right there actually means iniquity. But this is the sin of Israel. These high places are the sin of Israel, and it is going to be destroyed. Which honestly, this needs to take place because they have all these altars up there. And in the middle part of verse 8, it says, thorn and thistle shall grow up. Now, if you go back to previous chapters, what else are thorns and thistles? Where else are they going to be? In their beds, in their tent, right? These thorns and these thistles, they are sowing for themselves. So these thorns and these thistles, they shall grow up on their altars. They're not going to be used anymore. They'll be done away with. These things are going to perish. These things are going to pass. And then listen to this at the end of verse 8. And they shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. Now, why would any person be crying out to the hills and to the mountains to essentially fall and crumble us, fall and just wipe us out? That'd be a whole lot easier and quicker than what they're about to face. That's because they can see the persecution. They can see the trials that are coming their way. Their altars is going to pass. All these things they're going to see this coming, and they're going to yell out to the mountains, "Please cover us." Because we'd rather have this quick death. We'd rather the mountains come and cover us up than us face the persecution and the wrath of God that we have brought upon ourselves. The hills fall on us. And as you go into verse 9, it says, "For the days of Gibbeth you have sinned, O Israel. There they have continued. Shall not the war against the unjust overtake them in Gibeah?" We talked about this last week. It's relating back, if you want to go back and read it, if you didn't last time. It's going back and talking about the Levite's concubine there in Judges 19 in the sexual immorality that took place there. And so because of this harsh sin that took place there in Judges, it says that their sin has started there. It's now continued because they still have this sexual immorality, because they've fallen into the pagan worship and things like that, and they have temple prostitutes and all kinds of different things that God would not desire nor want. And so this has continued, and it says, "Shall not the war against the unjust overtake them?" Is God not eventually going to answer for your iniquities? We've seen this in a lot of the minor prophets so far. Eventually, God's patience is going to hit zero, and there will be an answer for all the iniquity. Eventually, the shot clock is going to hit zero. The same way with us today. They were going to have to make an answer because God was eventually going to deal with their iniquity. We as well are eventually going to have to deal with our iniquity. The best way to deal with it is to contact the blood of Christ. Because without it, it's going to be a tough answer. Because you're not going to be able to answer it. Because you're not going to have the saving grace that comes with the blood. And so here in verse 10 it says, "When I please, I will discipline them. All nations shall be gathered against them when they are bound up from their double iniquity." And so it's mentioning here Assyria, but it's also going to be other nations as well. There's going to be war and there's going to be wrath that is going to take place. But notice he says, "When I please, I will discipline them." The iniquity was just building and building. He was patient. Is he patient with us today? Should he already have come back based off of the shape that we got some places today? You put yourself in his shoes. I mean, I'd be on like the 1,000th, 2,000, 3,000 flood by now. I'd be just like, what are you? The people still don't get it. He is so patient. He is so good. Why is he so patient with us? Allowing the time. Allowing the time. Because if just one more will come to the truth, it'd be worth it. So how are we using the time? Are we wasting it? Or are we using it? Are we telling others about it? Are we wasting it? Time is precious. Time is so, so, so precious. You never get it back. You don't get back the time that you had before this. You don't get back the time after this if we get afforded that. You don't get the time back. So we can't waste it. And people today waste so much time on such silly, silly things. Small disagreements. Next thing you know, you don't talk to someone for years. Small little silly things get you all worked up for the entire day. Person cuts you off in traffic, the whole day's ruined. Silly. Wasting the time that God has gifted us. We're not gifted tomorrow. We could be, not promised it. So if all we have left is today, we might as well make it count. So we have to make sure we're using time wisely. So God is going to, eventually God's patience will run out, just as it did with them, and just as eventually the time here on earth is going to run out. And we're going to have to make an answer, whether we are here on that last day or whether we take our final breath and have to answer before Him. We are all going to answer before Him. So in verse 10 it says, verse 11, it says, Ephraim was a trained calf that loved to thresh. And I spared her fair neck, but I will put Ephraim to the yoke. Judah must plow. Jacob must harrow for himself. Ephraim being this trained calf, I saw, I guess it's not even a calf. This thing is massive. I don't know. On Douglas Dam Road, if anyone wants to go see this guy, he's always hanging out next to the same tree. Swear he's got to be like 700-800 pounds. Massive. He eats well. Trained calves in this time eat well. All you got to do is just keep going on the threshing floor. You can eat as much as you want. Now, I don't know about you, but if that's all I got to do is walk in circles, I get to eat whenever I want and stuff like that, not a bad gig compared to the other things they could be doing, right? Get to eat, be happy. You just got to do one simple task. They are like a trained calf that love to thresh. He says, and I spared their fair neck. I didn't put the heavy yoke and all these other things on them. I allowed them good area for a good crop. I allowed them the rain to come down so their crop could take place. I afforded them the promised land. That was not some wasteland desert that was, never going to be able to use for anything. It was a good land, was it not? Very good land. He said, I spared them this fair neck, but he says, going in the middle part of verse 11, but I will put Ephraim to the yoke. You had it easy. You had it right. You had the opportunity, right? God was allowing the way, but now, because they have chose this, now the yoke is going to be placed upon them. Did they have to choose this? Did this have to be the outcome? Didn't have to be the outcome, right? Again, their actions are telling God what they want, essentially. And so he said, I spared them, but now he's going to put them to the yoke. Says Judah must plow. And so as you start to think about this, the easy work that they once had, being able to eat whenever they want, the threshing floor and stuff like that, is now replaced with what? Much harder work. Every time I catch a thorn, I think, what if there was no thorns, Adam? What if there was none of this hard labor outside, Adam and Eve, right? What if we didn't have to take care of all this, right? And so as they go from this threshing, now all of a sudden, now Judah must plow. The easy work is now replaced with hard work. Why is it harder? Because you're going against the Creator. So Jacob was harrow for himself. And it says, verse 12, and this is where I really want to focus on tonight. Verse 12 and verse 13. This is so key for us today. It was key for them, and they're missing out on it. Verse 12, sow for yourself righteousness, reap steadfast love. Now, what it's saying here is because you have some imperatives. When you sow for yourself righteousness, what is the byproduct of that? Steadfast love. It's the byproduct. When you love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, you're putting everything you have into that. What is the byproduct of that? It's going to be the fruits of the spirits, all these other things, right? Goodness, all that you're going to follow after Him. If you love Him with everything, if you love your neighbor, you're going to keep right the other commandments. So when you sow for your self-righteousness, you will reap steadfast love. And here, as you can see in verse 12, we talked about this earlier. Break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord, that He may come and rain righteousness upon you. What happens if you don't break up the ground before you plant seeds? What happens if you don't get out all the weeds in your garden before you plant the seeds? And then when God brings the rain, what happens? You're like, I can't. Where are my green beans at? Got too many weeds. I can't see them. Right? My whole flower garden, I got more weeds than I got flowers. I can't even see my tulips. Right? In order to till the land, in order to remove the weeds, what do you first have to do? Realize that you need to till the soil and recognize what the weeds are. If you think the soil is as fine as it is, when it's hard as a rock, you ain't gonna be able to plant anything anyways. If you can't identify what the weeds are to remove them, they're going to overtake your garden. So A, you have to realize that you need help, that you need to till the soil to start off with, right? We need God. It's the first step. Two, you got to be able to identify what the weeds are in your life. What are the poisonous weeds that we talked about a couple verses before that are in your life? You got to be able to recognize them. How do you recognize them? Got to be honest with yourself. You can't just use mere words. I don't really struggle with that. That's not really a big deal. Surely God will accept it. Surely God doesn't mean I really have to love all my enemies because I can't stand this guy. You got to be able to recognize these things. You got to be able to spot them. The only way that you're going to be able to recognize the weeds and spot them is if you do some self-evaluation. And that is what I do every single Lord's Supper when we do it. When you sit there and you take that and you remember what God has done for you, the sacrifice that was made, I need to sit back and say, am I taking this seriously enough? Am I doing everything? Because He has given me so much. Am I giving Him all I've got? Or am I just using mere words? We got to self-evaluate. We have to be honest, and we have to be real with ourselves. So they got to turn over the soil. Because what does God want to do after we've removed these weeds, after we've tilled the soil? What does He want to do? You can say it louder. He wants us to have mercy. He wants us to spend eternity with Him. He wants us to have salvation. Now, I don't know who your best friend is, or if you'd be like, man, I would love to spend every waking second with that person. That's how much God cares for you. Because He wants to spend eternity with you. There's no time clock. He wants to spend every last bit of eternity with you. That's why He sent His Son. Sue?
This verse 12 is in contrast to another farming analogy, which was in chapter 8, verse 7, when the bad things that they were doing was sowing the wind and reaping the whirlwind. And now, in contrast to that, what they should have been doing is seeking the Lord and let His righteousness come on them for doing the right thing.
Yeah. And Sue brings up a good point. Back in chapter 8, it talks about sowing the wind, or they are sowing the wind and they reap the whirlwind. And what it's really getting out there in chapter 8 is when you sow things that are fluid, turbulent, not good for your soul, you reap exactly that. I'm trying to think of how I'd explain today, but essentially you're basically, agging on, I guess, a tornado to come and just cause everything to be havoc. When you sow havoc, you reap havoc, which is what we're about to see here in the next verse. And that's what I want us to really hone in tonight, because if you are sowing the right things in your life, truly sowing the right, now we got to start with that. We have to be honest with ourselves. If we are truly sowing the right things, truly chasing after God, we're going to reap the right things. The right things are going to happen. It's going to be a byproduct of it. But if you look at verse 13, you have plowed. Now, this is telling them what they have done, right? Before it says you should do, right? Now in verse 13 it says, you have plowed iniquity. You've plowed sin. You've plowed all these different things. Therefore, what are you going to do? You reaped injustice. If you sow bad, what do you reap? Bad. Sow good, you reap good, right? So you have plowed iniquity. You have reaped injustice. You have eaten the fruit of lies. What's the fruit of lies? All the idolatry, all these lies they're feeding into, all of it. It's just wrecking havoc. Their enemies, their neighbors, have made them weak. It's not that they physically have essentially made them weak. It's by the fact that their neighbors and their enemies have brought in all these different worships, and instead of them standing strong and showing them who the real God is, they've just gone into the pagan worship. They've just joined in with them. So it says, you have eaten the fruit of lies because you have trusted, circle, highlight, underline, because you have trusted in what way? Your own way. You know a good way to get in trouble? Trust in your own way. As soon as we start thinking that we are smarter than God, good luck. Because you have trusted in your own way and in the multitude of your warriors. Sounds like us today, don't it? Boy, our military, so strong. You see all those cool planes and ships we have? All those missiles, bombs, everything else. Well, we're so strong. Man, nothing can stop us except God, right? I don't care how strong your military is. You're not stopping God. So, because they've trusted in themselves, they trusted in the multitude of their warriors. They think that they're strong enough to protect themselves without God's help. Therefore, the tumult of war shall rise among your people, and all your fortresses shall be destroyed. God says, if you think you're so strong, put that to the test. It doesn't stand the test. So as we kind of close here tonight, I want us to think about verses 12 and verses 13. What seed are you sowing, but also what are you putting your trust in? Because as you can see in verse 13, they've eaten the fruit of the lies. Now there's plenty lies, fruits of lies out there today. There's plenty of them. And if we join in and we fall in, we eat those fruit of the lies because we've trusted in our own way, destruction is soon to follow. It will follow. Now you may say, well, how soon is soon? Boy, I'll tell you what, 50 years from now don't seem very soon, but when you compare it to eternity, 50 years sounds like tomorrow. Sounds like a second from now, because eternity is a whole lot longer, right? Our life is just, you can't even see it on a map when you compare it to eternity. You can't even tell, right? That's why you have to make sure we're using every second appropriately for the right way. So we have to make sure we're not trusting in our own way. We can't be trusting in our own strengths and things like that as they were. But instead, we need to make sure that we are sowing righteousness for ourselves so we can reap the steadfast love. And the steadfast love of who? The Creator, our Savior, right? The one who cares for us, the one who loves us. And I'll close with this, the end of verse 12. For it is the time to seek the Lord. There's no better time than right now to seek the Lord. Never a better time. It's always the best time. Every single second of the day is the best time to seek the Lord. We should always be seeking Him for everything. So if there's no questions or comments, I'll turn it over to Morgan for a song and Brian for a devotional. And I think Dale for a closing song. We're really getting after it. Questions, comments, concerns? All right. Thank y'all.
Did everybody get their Jesus, their little pocket Jesus? That's good. Back in the late 90s, or maybe even the early 2000s, there was so you could say either a fad or a movement going around where people were saying, what would Jesus do? Well, they took that to another step and they put it around a rubber band that would go around their wrists. And they wore that around there that said WWJD. And the reason that they did that is because they wanted to be reminded of what God's done for them. And if they ever get into a situation or anything like that, they want to remember and think about what would Jesus do in this particular circumstance. So you also have people that will wear a cross. You see people wearing a cross and everything else. And I think that's great. And unfortunately, a lot of people that wear the cross forget that wearing the cross. But that's another Devo, I guess. But the latest thing that's been going on here now lately is what I call the pocket Jesus. I can remember the first time that I saw one of these. I was at a gas station. I got out to pump gas, and I looked up on top of the pump. There was little Jesus. And what it did for me was it reminded me, slow down. What does God do for us? How am I acting right now? You know what I mean? These are good things. They may be small things, but we need things to remind us. Matter of fact, I don't know about you, but every time I pray and I ask God to remind me throughout my day of you and what you did for me. And it can come in all different kinds of ways. It can come with a little wristband, or it could come with a little Jesus. Or if you get in my car, you'll see that, you'll hear that I've got Christian music on, because Christian music just continually reminds me to keep my relationship good with God. The sad thing about this is that for a lot of Christians, this is going to remind people of God more than what they will. In other words, when people say they're a Christian and they go out into the world and they live their lives, they may not be living it all the time. They're not sharing Jesus with them. So, this, every time you see it, reminds you. Christians, unfortunately, don't. The sad thing, again, as well, is this is about an inch and an eighth tall, weighs nothing, less than an ounce. But like I said, it does more about reminding people instantly about Jesus Christ. One of the things we've got to be careful about is we don't want to be the Christians that when we're at church, you see Jesus and all this other kind of stuff. And when you're talking to your church, family, when you meet them outside or something or other, you see Jesus. But then what happens when we turn around and walk out of the building, or we turn around and walk away from that friend? We stick it in our pocket and they don't see Jesus anymore. Who do you think between him and me has the best ability or capability to be able to share Jesus with everyone around us and help bring them to God? The 6'11", all of me, 5'2.5" of her, each and every one of you have that ability. We need to be the pocket Jesus. It's good to be reminded in different ways about what God has to. You go into my Jeep, you look on the mirror, and you'll see that I've super glued Jesus on top of my mirror. I think all of us probably need a Jesus in our cars with this traffic and everything that goes on around here, right? But we need to be loving, forgiving, compassionate, Christ like examples when we're at work, when we're at play, when we're at school, wherever we are. We need to be that. Colossians 3:12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Be like Jesus. It's what it's telling us to do. Jacob was talking about things that you'll be reaping, you know. If we're going to be like Jesus, we want to reap the good things, right? We don't want to reap the bad things. We can tell quickly what we're doing. So, what we need to do is we need to practice kindness, compassion, forgiveness, because we build a stronger community around us. We build a stronger friendship around us, or a church. It gets stronger by us doing that. And by living in the truth, we create an environment that reflects Jesus' character. But we don't do that just for tonight, because Jesus, being like Jesus, means being like Jesus as all the time. Are we perfect? No. He knows that. But we need to do what we can. Because while you're out there doing it, you're filled with opportunities to serve and connect with those around us, making a tangible difference in people's lives. When we walk out of here tonight, I want us to think about that. Let's be the pocket Jesus. Let's be the best versions of ourselves. And the best way to do that is to put on Christ. Inspired by Jesus and guided by his teachings, through our actions and words, we can help be the light to make this world brighter than ever. So I hope tonight we just don't talk about putting on Jesus and then walk out the door and then stick him in our pocket. Let's put him in our hearts. Let us go out there and be the light that we should be, the light that God wants us to be, the light that Jesus died for. So if you're a Christian and for one reason or another, you've put Jesus in your pocket, or you're going through something in your life and you've turned away, it's time to turn back. It's time to take Jesus out of your pocket, put him into your heart, and accept him back, because he's got his arms wide open saying, come home. Tonight is the night to do that. If we need to pray with you, pray for you, that's what we're here for. That's what family is for. Church is family. And if there's some reason, if there's somebody here tonight, and I'm sure there probably isn't, but if there is, that hasn't taken that step, there is no more important decision that you're going to make in your entire life here on earth than to give your life to Christ. And you can do that tonight. So if we can help you in any way, let us stand and sing this song with Dale.